Taichiblue Studios.
Music Paint.
From the MIDI connection from Finale going back to the Motif. I wanted to show, last time I kind of showed in part 2, I showed how to actually bring the file in. But you really need to set up your MIDI devices ahead of time before you can use them in Finale. So you do that in the MIDI studio under the audio setup. If you see here, I've set up my MIDI devices that I'm going to use. You know, I've got my Motif and my MoX, and I've got my Clavinova there, and my iPad is set up here. The MIDI drivers, you know, they're all set up here in the MIDI studio. And my MIDI Express XT there, that's set up. You want to set all of this up first, and this is under the audio MIDI setup on the Mac. Yeah, I use the Mac and the iPad in this studio for computing. Not really Windows. I assume there's something similar on Windows. So you use the Mac Studio, the MIDI Studio that's under the audio setup. So you make sure your devices are set up first. And once they're set up in there, then Finale is going to be able to see those devices. So I'm just going to bring up, you know, like the last, you know, something that I worked on recently as a part of this song I'm messing around with right now. And so one of the first things you want to do, once you've got all of those devices set up, you do the MIDI setup in Finale, and you make sure you're set for play through MIDI. That's important. So we're going to make sure we play through MIDI, and then we're going to go down here to device setup, and we're going to take the MIDI internal speaker setup option, right? And this is where we set up the devices that Finale are actually going to talk to. So I make sure my MIDI system is set up there, and I choose MIDI system. And for channels 1 through 16, that's where I want my Motif XF8 set. So this is telling Finale to for channels 1 through 16 to talk to my Motif XF8. And the devices that you see in this list, those are devices that we set up, that I showed you earlier in the MIDI Studio setup. So that's where this list is coming from. So once you set things up in that MIDI Studio under Audio MIDI Setup for the Mac, once you set that up, then those devices will show up in this list. And you can pick and set your MIDI sync and your receive MIDI from and your send MIDI time clock to. You can set all that stuff up here by picking those devices that you want the MIDI to go to right in this device setup. So this is actually pretty easy to do. Once you know that you want to make sure you have your MIDI devices set up under the audio MIDI setup on the Mac. And so like if I go into Score Manager right now and I look at the instrument list, right, you'll see under device we have the Motif XF8. It has been selected. And so any device, any MIDI device that we have defined in that MIDI Studio, that device will show up as an option or a selection choice for the Finale environment. And so when I want to do playback, and that's just the goal for me, I need to play back any of my Finale stuff. I need to play back that stuff to my Motif or my MoX or, you know, my QI 100 or Clavinova or something like that. I'll direct it all here in the instrument list. I'll pick which device, which instrument I want it to go to. And so this is a thing that allows us to, once we have this set up, this is what lets me achieve the playback from Finale to my Motif XF8 or any of my MIDI devices. So this is just that knowledge drop for part 3 that I talked about, and I just wanted to go over the process of you set up first your devices and the audio MIDI setup under the, for the Mac itself. You make sure your device drivers are loaded for those MIDI devices. You set that up, you name the devices that you have, and then you can come right inside of Finale, and under device setup in Finale, you can set the MIDI devices up that you want to use for your MIDI system, and for your MIDI sync and your MIDI time clock. You set all of that up there, and then you are able to play the MIDI back how you want it in Finale. It works pretty good. It's pretty simple. So that's all I want to drop. Just a short knowledge drop on how to set that up. The connection between the Motif and the Finale environment, and just setting those MIDI device drivers up. Okay, catch you all next time.